Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Matt, and today I wanted to talk about changing your mindset and your perspective on learning a language. And I think that for a lot of people, they think of learning a language as something that's very boring, something that's very tedious, something that's very mentally taxing, something that's just kind of a struggle to get motivated to do. And if you've been learning a language for a while or have a hobby of learning languages, you probably don't feel this way. You probably think learning a language is fun, it's intellectually stimulating, it's very rewarding. But the fact remains, I think, that a lot of people don't have this mindset, and it's a big barrier for some people just getting very far in the language learning process or getting started. And I think it's really important to have a very positive mindset about learning a language and have a mindset that's very supportive to your overall success with learning a language. And I think that a big reason probably why some people feel like learning a language is tedious, boring, it's mentally taxing, is just some of the elements in our modern society. So, if you think about it, there's so many options available to you on what you can do with your free time, right? And a lot of these things are, instant gratification. They're instant stimulus, and they require low effort. And unfortunately, some of these things I think lower our attention span. And start conditioning us to be very comfortable with getting instant gratification, with getting stimulus very quickly with little to no effort, and it kind of dulls us. And I don't necessarily think that sometimes this is like really the best thing ever, right? Whether it's social media or whatever, right? It's so easy, for example, to put on a Netflix show. You're seconds away from putting a Netflix show on or putting a YouTube video on or checking social media. And I think that a lot of times these things create a mindset, create a habit in us where we're used to getting instant results. We're used to putting low effort in to get stimulus back. And because there's so many alternatives too, and alternatives that are giving us this stimulus in various ways, whether it's entertainment or whatever, I think that it can kind of make language learning seem really boring or tedious, when in fact I don't think it really is. In a lot of cases, I think it's because you have so many options available to you, you're so comfortable with some of these other things, that language learning seems difficult. And it doesn't just apply to language learning, it can apply to many different things. And so, another good comparison or kind of way to think about things that I think is interesting is just take a look at people 300 years ago, right? Let's say the founding fathers of the United States, people in the Renaissance, something like that, right? Where after you finish your day's work, right, it's nighttime, and you really don't have a lot of options available to you, right? You could write, you could read, or study or do some derivation on that, or write, right? You don't have a cell phone, it's communication's not very easy. And so in those evenings, you're probably doing a ton of reading and a ton of writing. And that's probably why, these people were just so good at writing, right? Because, they're just constantly doing it. They're constantly reading, they're constantly writing. And, when you do things for long enough, you're going to get really good at it. But there's not a ton of options, right? And they're probably getting a ton of knowledge from reading, from studying and learning different things, and then of course just writing and expressing themselves, very eloquently. Versus, in our society, I think that our free time in a lot of ways goes to more leisure-like activities, whether it's Netflix shows or whatever, right? Versus for someone like the founding fathers, something like that, their leisure-like activities were writing or reading, which in a lot of ways might be more productive than some of the activities that we spend on in the modern era, right? And it's not to say that, some of the things that we have aren't useful. It's not to say that they're all bad, but I think that probably in a lot of ways, time was spent more towards productive means, 300 years ago, because there's less alternatives, etc. And the thing about it is, because you only have so many alternatives, the idea of reading and writing is probably not considered something that's boring or tedious, right? It's probably a lot more fun and rewarding to them, right? Especially because they have less relative options. Versus us, we have these quick stimulus hits, our attention span is lower, things like that, which kind of makes us think that reading is more of a grind, or it's harder to do. And you kind of see this with people in modern society reading less, etc. So, it's not when I say, like, kind of, the founding fathers are doing these readings and writings and things like that. I wouldn't say it's not mentally taxing for them, but maybe it was less mentally taxing than it is for us, right? So let's say studying Greek, right, is minus 10 points of mental taxation. Well, maybe if you're just used to it and you're in that habit of doing it, it's only minus 5, right? So I think in a lot of ways, it's very easy, especially with all these distractions and things we have in modern society, to feel like language learning or any other activity similar to that is more taxing or boring than it really is. And so, I think there's ways to combat that, right? So, obviously the first one is try to just get rid of some of these influences and ideas in our life that really aren't very productive. I think that we have gotten very accustomed to some of the things that are in our modern society, whether it's social media, instant gratification, and things like that, that make the process of learning a language or similar things a lot harder to do, right? Harder to stay motivated, harder to just get results or things like that. It's not to say that everyone is in that situation, but I do think in some aspects it is a little bit harder. So any way we can kind of get rid of these influences in our life that aren't helping us and kind of reorient ourselves to more productive means, I think that could be very helpful. So I think that's the first thing. But the second thing is, just getting comfortable with language learning, right? I don't think you have to remove all the technology and things in your life, but this is why I think in a lot of ways I stress routine and habit in some of my videos, because if you just have discipline, you are used to investing time and energy into language learning, slowly over time you're going to get used to the idea of learning a language. You get used to having to have patience with results. You get used to dealing with struggles with learning a language. You get used to the mental energy necessary to learn a language. You get comfortable with it. You get comfortable with it from a time perspective, from a mental perspective, from an energy perspective, and then it becomes easier and easier to do. You start seeing more results, and language learning becomes a fun activity. It becomes intellectually stimulating. It becomes very rewarding. And so while there are activities that are lower value, they give you more instant gratification and things like that, you've almost trained your mind to get similar or more value out of an activity like language learning that doesn't necessarily provide you instant gratification and things like that. So I think a big way to kind of get to a place where language learning isn't boring, it's mentally taxing and things like that, is to build a habit and get very comfortable with learning a language. And I think that this is really the crux of it, right? Is to change your mindset and perspective about learning a language, right? It's not boring, it's not mentally taxing. It can be something that's very fun, intellectually stimulating. I think in a lot of ways you just have to train your mind. And if you just see some people out there, they make the assumption that it's boring and it's taxing and all these things, and then they try to find workarounds around it, right? So they say, okay, learning a language is tough, it's boring. How can I learn a language only by speaking? Speaking is fun, this is exciting. And unfortunately, I think some people start seeing that and they try to sell people that method, or they try to sell them, oh, hey, here's how you learn a language only by speaking, only via music. And in reality, it's just addressing the symptoms and not the root cause. And I think a lot of the root cause is, once again, reorienting our lives to kind of get rid of some of these negative influences and also just get in the habit and routine of language learning. So a little bit different, compared to some of my other videos, but I think it's worth just thinking about these ideas and just thinking about how you can orient your mindset better towards language learning. Because I think that if you have a very solid mindset that's very positive about language learning, ultimately in the long run, it's going to help you quite a bit in the end of the day. So that's what I had to say. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.